Welcome to the It's All About Missions podcast with Brady Van Winkle, as we endeavor to talk about missions and the need for the gospel all around the world. We hope we can help you find your place in world evangelism. And for questions or for more information, please check out it'sallaboutmissions.com. And now we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of It's All About Missions Country of the Week Country Spotlight podcast, as we are going back to the continent of Asia. And we're going to visit a country today I've actually had the privilege of going to and being in this country. And we're going to be looking at the country of Cambodia. And I almost said it in Turkish, sorry. Turkish, it's Cambodia. But Cambodia. And Cambodia, it has a population around right under about 17 million people. And there's just a great need for the gospel there in Cambodia. The capital city is known as Phnom Penh. And Phnom Penh is also the largest city there with about 3 to 4 million people, and then a lot of people live nearby there. But there's a great need for the gospel in all of Cambodia with the 17 plus million people there. The language that is spoken there is Khmer. Yeah, that is spelled. It's not come here. It's Khmer. 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 I think I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not, but it's Khmer. And so that is the language that is spoken there, and it is somewhat, from what I've heard, it's somewhat a difficult language to learn, and things like that. Very similar to other languages nearby between Chinese, Vietnamese, all of those other languages very similar. But there's a great need for the gospel, and an openness for the gospel as well. I had the privilege of several years ago spending some time in Cambodia, about a week there. Very hot, but it was an enjoyable time getting to meet people. Very difficult, obviously, working through translators and things like that while I was just there visiting. But you could just see the country is made up 93% of the people there would be considered Buddhist, and you can just see everywhere you go. You see temples, you see people where they can leave things, and they have these little prayer areas. You see the Buddhist monks walking up and down the street. People show respect to them, but it's so sad that there are people there, and they're just living their lives, and it's a very, very poor country. There's not a lot of wealth there, and there's just a great need to go back to its past and what happened there, and the fact that many people were just killed there in the killing fields. And I was able to go and experience the killing fields, and seeing the bones of the people that killed there just broke my heart. What's even sadder, though, is for a while it was under the previous regime and all, it was closed up because of communism, things like that. No one could get in there, and then shortly after it opened up, and guess who followed shortly in behind there? Many other different religions, false cults, things like that. Sent their people in, sent their missionaries in, sent groups in to go and take the gospel there, their message there. And sadly, we, as true Bible-believing Christians, had very few people prepared to go in. I know some people that are working there, and I'm praising God for the work that they're doing, but there is such a need there in Cambodia. We need to pray that God raises some more laborers, and we need to pray this week. I'd ask you to pray for the country of Cambodia. There's an openness there. It's wide open for the gospel. There's no problem getting in there, taking the gospel there, staying there, taking and planting churches. I'd ask you to pray for those missionaries that are there. Pray that God will give them boldness, that God will give them the strength and the courage to preach the gospel and see souls saved, to see lives changed, to see men trained up and Cambodian men raised up and trained and sent to pastor their own churches. We need to pray for the Cambodian pastors that are there, that God will embolden them to share the gospel with people, but also that God will give them fruit for their labors and disciples in their churches and men that they could train as well to send out. We need to pray for the believers in Cambodia. They'll be bold to share the gospel with it openly and with people. But also we need to pray for the Cambodian people who are blinded. Most of them are blinded by Buddhism, where really there is no hope. You just live your life. You try to do as much good as you can, and hopefully, in the end, you're reincarnated, and it all works out in the end. But what they need is they need to hear the gospel, that Jesus loved them, that Jesus came down on the cross for their sins. They put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. They can know for sure that heaven is their home. We need to pray for the country of Cambodia. We need to pray that God will raise up an army of laborers to go while the door is still open, while people are looking, while people are looking for answers. We need to pray that God will raise up an army to go and take the gospel to the people of Cambodia, and that we can see Cambodia reached with the gospel in this generation. And I want to challenge you that as we're praying for Cambodia and as we're praying for the world to reach with the gospel in this generation, let's be doing all we can to see the world reach with the gospel in this generation. You shouldn't just be praying. You should be praying, but on top of praying, you should be faithfully attending your church every service. Every time the doors open, be there. You should share the gospel with friends, family, coworkers, people you come in contact with. You should be discipling people. You should be giving towards missions. You should be preparing and planning to go on a mission trip sometime yourself, to go out and get outside the country and to see what it's like in one of these other foreign countries and see what it's like to be on the field. But also you should be considering and praying, God, what part would you have me? Would you have me to go and take the gospel? Lord, I will go. Be willing to give your life to go, because there are billions upon billions of people dying, going to hell. God gave us a command to get the gospel to the world in this generation, reach the world with the gospel, and we need to fill that great commission. And I want to challenge you, let's be praying and doing all we can so we can see the world reach the gospel in this generation. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of It's All About Missions. And we'd like to ask you to do a couple things for us. The first thing I ask you to do, so if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date when all of our new episodes drop. And that way, as a new episode comes, you'll get a notification that lets you know, hey, we've got a new episode of It's All About Missions. Second thing I ask you to do, if you haven't yet, please make sure to leave us a review. These reviews are very vital, and they help us out, and they help other people to see us in the podcast player of choice. They'll see us and see those reviews and say, hey, I want to check out this podcast. And lastly, one other thing I'd like you to do, why don't you share us with a friend, a family member, somebody you know, and say, hey, why don't you go over and check out It's All About Missions. That'll help us grow our audience, help people to know more about It's All About Missions, and guess what? It'll help more people get involved in reaching the world with the gospel. I want to challenge you to know that the Bible, it's all about missions. And as a Christian, your life should be all about missions. And what are you going to do to impact the world with the gospel in this generation?